The other thing I wanted to talk about today, and this is the title of the show, is Don Lemon. I didn't really tweet about this on Twitter. To me, I just see it as generally low-hanging fruit when this kind of stuff happens, but we have to talk about it on the show. The other day on CNN, Don Lemon calls out white people, the white race. And we just can't let him get away with that. We can't let Don Lemon get away with attacking white people like this. You might have heard about it if you watch Fox News, if you're on Twitter. He said on CNN the other day, quote, "Earlier this week I made some comments about that in a conversation with Chris Cuomo about white people being a threat to the country." He went on, "I said that the biggest terror threat in this country comes from radicals on the far right, primarily white men. That angered some people. But let's put emotion aside and look at the cold, hard facts. The evidence is overwhelming." First of all, like, this is why we have to talk about it on the show. Do you realize why this sentence is so frustrating? Before we even get into, he's about to make a blanket judgment about an entire category of people. So before we even get into the judgment itself, think about what he's saying. People got mad that I called out an entire group of people. Like, yeah, seems reasonable. And then he said, but let's put emotion aside and look at the cold, hard facts. The evidence is overwhelming. And you're like, gee, wow. Cool standard for making claims, Don Lemon. You want to bring that to the White House? Could we think of other examples? Gee, could we use your imagination? Maybe go back to some of the other shows I've done this week or this month or in the past 2 years. Could you think of any other claim that could be made in politics that maybe is pushed under the rug because it upsets the wrong people? But if you look at the cold hard facts, it turns out to actually be quite true. So first of all, I read that first sentence and I think, wow, like, they're just taunting us. It was like this week with Hillary Clinton, where she was in an interview and somebody confused, I think it was Eric Holder for Cory Booker. She confused two black guys. And Hillary Clinton was like, oh, they all look the same, right? And I'm thinking, okay, at this point, they're just taunting us. Either we live in a simulation or these people are just sick and evil and know exactly what they're doing. And they're just giving us the finger and saying, like, the rules just don't apply to us. We can do whatever we want, and you can't. Because you understand, and we're about to get into it, that what Don Lemon is about to do with the white race, you're really not allowed to do with anybody else. So he referred to a Government Accountability Office report, which is totally bogus, that says that since September 11, 2001, a convenient starting point for the study. Don't you think after September 11, 2001, in terror attacks, right-wing extremists have killed 106 people in 62 different attacks, while Islamic extremists have killed 119 people in 23 different attacks. And so he says, quote, "We have to stop demonizing people and realize the biggest terror threat in this country is white men." Quite an interesting sentence when you think about it. Have to stop demonizing people. Okay, let's see where he goes with that one. Interesting strategy. And then realize that the real biggest threat is white men. Oh, of course. Most of them radicalized to the right, and we have to start doing something about them. There is no travel ban on them. There is no ban. You know, they have the Muslim ban. There is no white guy ban. So what do we do about that? Says Don Lemon. And I just, we look at a statement like this, and there's just, where do we even begin? It's like an onion. It's like, I don't know, that's kind of trite. But there's just so much to tackle here. In the first place, the most offensive thing is, I'm going to say something that might ruffle some feathers about a certain group, but let's leave that aside and look at the cold hard facts. Could we do that about Jews, ladies and gentlemen? Can anybody do that about Jews for 5 seconds? Okay. Can we do that about black men? Can we do that about Muslims? Can we do that about women? Because every time I bring up some of these inconvenient statistics about certain groups, I'm a bigot. I must hate all of them. I must be this horrible, prejudiced person. Fire him, dox him, get him kicked out of the media. You know, you point out that Jews are overrepresented in media by 2,000%. Nobody wants to talk about that. That's anti-Semitic. That's the official definition of anti-Semitism by the ADL. You talk about women. You talk about rape statistics, the rate at which they lie about it, the rate at which they fantasize about it. You talk about statistics about women in terms of intelligence, in terms of all, I mean, we could spend all day on that one. You're a sexist, you're a misogynist, you can't say that, you must hate all women. You talk about black people, okay? Where to begin on our black friends? You say Detroit. Literally, you say Detroit, and already they think you're about to say something racist because it is such a clear, cut and dry example of black failure that to even utter the word Detroit conjures exactly the thesis statement of our worldview, basically, right? So you're not allowed to say any of that, but hey, I know you might be upset that we're about to hit all white men. That's okay. It's about the facts. Well, then he does this study from the Government Accountability Office, which, by the way, is bogus. And this is staggering to me. He uses the study to say the real problem is white men. And you have to be pretty inventive to paint the demographic problem in America as a white male problem. You know, you have to be pretty creative to look at all the data on violent crime, on terror. It takes a real prodigal mind, or what is the word, prodigal mind, to fashion that narrative out of the facts and say, oh, it's really the white men. And one of the stats they use, and I hear this all the time when I go to these rallies or I talk to reporters. I remember after Charlottesville, there was this idiot on NBC. What was his name? He had some stupid name. It was like Gotti, some goofy Middle Eastern name, some hipster doofus. And he was like, I was talking to him, and I said, well, you know, one of the ways the media lies is they keep, this was in August 2017. I said, one of the way the media lies, one example, is that whenever a Muslim terror attack happens, they trot out this talking point that the real problem is white men. And we all know that's not true. And he was like, oh, no, but the Government Accountability Office said that actually, right-wing men do more terror attacks. Well, let's think about what the study is saying that Don Lemon is using to launch this sweeping judgment about my people, white men. It says that since September 11th, 2001, white men have committed, or rather right-wing extremists, which are largely white men, have committed more attacks than Muslims. Now, it's very convenient, everything about the study. For starters, it starts immediately after, the day after, the deadliest terror attack in American history, which happened to kill around 3,000 people, if you take the official number. So, and then the largest attack, clearly hijacking planes, using them as missiles to fly into buildings. That's kind of a big deal. You know, so I think it's actually quite interesting that the study, for starters, starts after the biggest terror attack. So yeah, if you leave out 9/11, the numbers tend to be somewhat equal, but then we look at the numbers. And the numbers are that there were 62 attacks by right-wing extremists and 23 attacks by Muslims. Now you might say, whoa, well, hey, there you go. 3 times as many attacks by right-wing extremists, primarily white men, than Muslim extremists. There you go. Everyone thinks that Muslims blow people up. Oh, why do you think that? That's so ridiculous. I've never heard of that happening. Muslims blowing people up? The real problem is white men shooting people. I know when I'm in an airport, I'm not looking at the guy in a hijab or the woman in a hijab. I'm not looking at that Muslim guy with a beard whose palms are sweating and who's rocking back and forth. I'm not worried about him. I'm not sitting in a strategic location so I, would have the chance to strike him if he were to get up abruptly. I'm not worried about that person. I'm worried about all these white men. I'm looking at tall, handsome, well-to-do, rich-looking people, like Elliot Rodger. Maybe they have a little bit of foreign admixture. I'm looking at those people in the airports because you never know. Maybe they're going to start whipping out a gun and killing Chads and Stacys. You never know, right? But then you look at the number of people killed and you say, oh, well, 23 attacks, but let's actually think about the damage done. Muslims in their 23 attacks killed 119 people. That's excluding 9/11. Right-wing extremists only killed 106. So Muslims have killed more. And then you might say, okay, well, killings versus attacks, it's arbitrary. They still commit more attacks. And then you got to think of things in terms of proportionality. And this is the last thing about this number, which is, in the first place, you don't have 9/11. That's kind of a flaw. In the second place, they kill more people anyway. And then in the last place, even if you maintain, well, right-wing people commit more terror attacks, what is the percentage of white men in the country versus Muslims? Does anybody know off the top of their heads? Less than 5% of the American population is Muslim. 63% of the country's population is white. So maybe 32% is white men. Does anybody know 3 divided by 5 or 30 rather, divided by 5 or divided by 4? Between 6 and 7. So multiply the amount of Muslim terror attacks by 6 or 7, and then you'll get some sense of proportionality. Is 62 7 times greater than 23? Is 106 7 times greater than 119? Of course not. So again, it's about proportionality. If you've got, I think it's something like 2 or 3% Muslims, and they're committing just about the same amount of attacks by killings as white people, who are in the majority in the country, I think you've got a problem on your hands, right? And so that's the first part. But then he goes into white people. Well, we have to ban them. They're the real problem. And then I think, well, let's look at Don Lemon. Let's look at Don Lemon. Don Lemon's a black man. And, you know, I've heard all these breathless journalists talk about the angry white man. They try to use that to shame us. That's a pejorative. The angry white male. You ever heard that expression before? On television, in print, on radio, in commercials. The angry white man who's angry at change. He's a knuckle-dragging, superstitious, primitive guy who's terrified of change. He wants to bring us back. He wants to put you all back in chains and everything. That's the real problem. But we never hear about black male rage. You know, isn't that kind of funny? I don't remember a white guy ever getting killed by a police officer and it turning into a big circus and then people burning down entire cities. That's happened quite a few times with black men in the last 5 years. And look, don't believe me, maybe this is going to ruffle some feathers. In the words of Don Lemon, why make it up when I could just quote him? I know this might anger some people, but let's put emotion aside and let's look at the cold, hard facts. The evidence is overwhelming. Let's look at FBI Table 43. Let's look at arrests for murder and non-negligent manslaughter. For whites, you've got 3,799 arrests for murder. Now remember, there's 200 million whites in the country. They're 63% of the population. Blacks, on the other hand, whites committed about 3,800 murders. Blacks, on the other hand, committed 4,379. So isn't that kind of funny? Blacks are 14% of the population, but they commit more murders, and it's not even close to being equal. They commit 500 more murders in the year than white people, who are 63%. So white people, it's 4 times more white people, but less murders than blacks. Well, I'm sure that's arbitrary. Let's look at some of these other numbers, like robbery. Robbery. For whites, it's 32,945. That's a lot. We have to do better, white people. My fellow angry white men, it's time for us to be better. But wait a second. Don't get angry. We're looking at the cold, hard facts. Blacks commit 44,271 cases. So, I don't know. People say the stereotypes are wrong, but I guess we can't judge books by their cover, unless it's white people, I guess. And I guess you get the picture. You look at all these other numbers, we see a very similar trend. We could even look at Hispanics if you want. It's actually almost unfair, because if you look at whites, Hispanics are also counted. But if you look at murders for Hispanics, you've got 1,052 arrests for murder. So you can actually subtract, because they count Hispanics and white, or at least they do a lot of them. You can actually count 1,000 of those murders from the whites out of the murder rate. So you actually bring it down to about 2,600 murders for whites compared to 4,400 for blacks. They do almost half the murders then, if we're looking at it in that way, if you count out the Hispanics. And look, Don Lemon, I don't mean to vilify a whole group of people. I'm not trying to anger anybody. We're just looking at the cold, hard facts. And the cold, hard facts, which are overwhelming, lead us to the conclusion, why isn't there a black male ban? They're dangerous. They're killing people. They're robbing people. They're raping people. It's cold, hard facts, folks. I know that might ruffle some feathers, but we're using the Don Lemon standard. We have to be logical. We have to be evidence-based. I don't want to live in a city like Detroit. I don't want to live in Inglewood, Chicago. I don't want to live in Garfield Park. I don't want to live in Baltimore. I don't want to live in Compton, which is not only 33% black, but you get the picture. I don't want to live in these kinds of neighborhoods because I don't like getting murdered. So, it's time to stop demonizing people, in the words of Don Lemon, and realize that the biggest violent threat in the country is black men. What are we going to do about that, folks? So I know a lot of people, they've got a lot to say. Tensions are high. I know Jared Holt is furiously scribbling in his notebook. Nick Fuentes is saying some radical things. all I'm doing is taking Don Lemon's words, and he's a great scholar. He's gay. So this guy's an aristocrat, okay? This guy, we have to respect his lifestyle and his race. This guy has set a pretty solid standard for how we're going to make public policy decisions. We're going to look at these statistics, cold hard evidence. We're going to factor in proportionality, and then we're going to look at what we have. We have to do something about it, folks. So these are not my views. I would never hold these views. I think white and black people are all equal. That's why we feel the way we do about white and black people, totally equally, because they are equal. It's not a construct. That's not something we made up. And everybody who thought differently, they were just ignorant. When people thought that people were unequal, don't even get me started. All these bigots like Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, James Madison, James Monroe, Calvin Coolidge, Harding, Teddy Roosevelt, and all these bigots and, just about everybody for the last 500 years, when they didn't believe in equality, they just didn't realize it. It was right there in front of them. How could they not realize we were all equal? It's self-evident, of course we're equal. How could it be anything but? And, it's kind of crazy how this obvious fact of equality stared them in the face for 500 years, and it only took us, the most enlightened generation of young people, millennials, Gen X, boomers, to realize, no, that, hey, idiots, they actually are equal. They're not inferior. The reason they were living in, mud huts and everything, they were disadvantaged, okay? It was like the geography was bad. Oh, all right, bigot, the reason they murder more people, look, we're, mean to them, okay? And they're poor. And when you're poor, you tend to kill people. Okay, never mind that the richest blacks commit more crime than the poorest whites. It's because they were poor for longer. It's compounds, it's residual. So I don't believe any of this racist stuff. Don't get me wrong. I'm not on that. I believe in the equality, but I just wanted to illustrate the absurdity of Don Lemon's narrative by just a little reductio ad absurdum. That if we're going to take this convoluted process of looking at hard evidence, data, not caring what people feel, making these blanket judgments, look at where that's going to lead us to. It's going to lead us to another Holocaust. So I hope you're happy with yourself, Don Lemon. Stephen Campbell says, pillow-biting Don Lemon talking about how dangerous white men are while he goes to bed with one. LOL. True. Yeah, isn't that interesting? All these people, all they can do is complain about white men, and then who's the most desirable of all, right? There was a study that was done. I don't know if it was real or fake, but it said 89% of women prefer white men with dark features. Mediterranean mindset, hello? So, yeah. Well, and you want to talk about, we didn't even get to the gay stuff. We talk about cold, hard facts about groups of people. We did Muslims, we did women, we did blacks, we did Jews, homosexuals. I mean, are we even going to get into that one about AIDS and everything else that's going on there? So you want to talk about cold, hard facts, Don Lemon. I don't think you want to go there. It's such a mistake when these people do this. They're like, according to the data, no, drop it. Trust me, drop it. According to the data, white men, slow down there. I don't think you know what you're getting into. You really want to open up that can of worms on statistics about races. I don't think you want to go down that road, Buster. If you do, by all means. But I don't think you're going to like what happens next. You start out so overconfident, and then that hope and enthusiasm completely gone.